Similarly, in corporate America, I need to be a good steward of the shareholders' assets, right, to make sure that they're being used properly. Furthermore, you've got integrity and accountability, empathy and humility, trust and loyalty, this mutual beneficial relationship, and performance and well-being. Okay, so how does it create a positive organizational culture and climate? Number one, servant leadership influences the culture and climate. Servant leader organizations tend to increase job satisfaction for those that work for them. You model positive behavior, provide direction, and boost performance and engagement. What about social responsibility and sustainability? More and more companies are interested in making sure that they have a role as a social, responsible, and sustainable type company. And servant leadership fits very well with that model. It's kind of aspects like balanced performance, of balancing economic performance with social and environmental factors. Once again, this empowerment thing shows up, fostering a workplace to enhance performance, engagement, well-being, and then value alignment, having organizational goals with personal. And I'll say that personally, as a servant leader, I function much better in organizations that have that same servant leader mentality, or in teams that have that same servant leader mentality. So the more I am personally aligned, the better I perform for an organization. All right, so let's go now and have a little bit more fun with this and talk some historical and fictional examples of servant leaders. So let's start with the softball, right? Abraham Lincoln, his leadership during the Civil War. So he guided the nation through conflict and abolished slavery. For empathy and healing, he addressed the suffering aimed to unify the country. Awareness, he understood the deep moral and political impact of his decisions. Reading through some of his letters, you can almost feel the emotions that come through about how much he felt was on his shoulders throughout this time. He used persuasion over coercion. This is interesting to be a wartime president and say, like, hey, he didn't use coercion, because, I mean, you could argue the use of the military did, but on a very personal basis, in his personal discussions, he absolutely leaned more on dialogue. There was never a threat of force personally with Abraham Lincoln. It was more through the legitimate military use. Democratic stewardship, he upheld and protected democratic policies. So he had a bigger goal in mind. It wasn't just about, I as the president make this right. It's to form a more perfect union. And then community building, right? Okay, let's shift gears to another good historical example, Martin Luther King Jr., another obvious one that if you were to ask anybody on the street, hey, name some servant leaders, I think most people would pretty quickly go to a Martin Luther King Jr. He had visionary leadership. He had foresight. He thought about the impact and challenges of everything he was going through with civil rights. Growth and development focused on empowering followers to realize their potential, and then service to humanity. So he had a broader, more ethical goal. I will come back to this growth and development for just a minute, because for me, the heart of servant leadership, the heart of why I even lead, the heart of leadership excellence is all about helping others to achieve their own personal maximum potential. That's what I believe in. That's what I do. That's why I lead. That's why I do this. That's why I'm doing what I do today, is to hopefully help you achieve your maximum potential. Okay, let's get a little bit more esoteric and let's talk about some fictional examples. I think most of us had to read To Kill a Mockingbird in high school, so we can remember this Atticus Finch. Atticus Finch, integrity and courage, right? Defended a black man against racial injustice. Humility, freely, openly admitted his own limitations and mistakes. Active listening, gave full attention to his kids, clients, children, community. And then respect for all. He valued every individual's dignity beyond race and class, right? All right, even more esoteric, I happen to be a Star Wars fan, so one of my favorite servant leaders is Yoda. Yoda is known for being wise, patient, empowering, and have humility, right? Deep knowledge, shares deep knowledge and understanding, patient with Luke and all the people that were not necessarily worthy of his patience. Empowerment, once again, helping others achieve their potential. One of Yoda's main strengths is that he was a teacher. And then humility. I mean, he was a selfless mentor. And for those of you who don't like Star Wars as much, I think Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek is also a good example of a servant leader, a good fictional example, where he was a visionary diplomat. He used intelligence for problem solving, and also, engaged his entire team in a way that brought everyone to the table for problem solving. He was an effective communicator. and had ethical leadership, and he upheld the values of the organization he was, specifically Starfleet. Okay, so how does this work for you? So what can you do on a day-to-day basis to incorporate these servant leadership behaviors to your work? So what I would start with is I would say, look at one of those definitions, one of those subfacets, like, that one really resonates with me. I wouldn't say try and pick 10, that's a lot. I would say try and pick 3 or 4. If I only pick one, it would be empowerment. If I had one thing to do for servant leadership, it'd be empowerment. But let's talk about some of the ways you can do it. Number one, you can use tools and frameworks to measure and evaluate your leadership skills. There's all kinds of surveys out there about servant leadership that you can give yourself and give your employees just to gauge where you're at for servant leadership, which help you assess your strengths and weaknesses and gain better understanding of your own behaviors. A case study for an organizational leadership is the Tylenol scare of 1982. So in September of 1982, 7 people died after taking cyanide-based extra-strength Tylenol. Johnson & Johnson immediately pulled everything from the shelf. They recalled 31 million bottles of Tylenol. They said public safety is our priority, and then they began reestablishing trust. And the industry impact is they changed the entire industry when it comes to standards around tamper-proof lids and things like that. So a lot of these servant leadership behaviors tend to be very easy to understand on an individual level, especially things like empowerment and stuff like that. But when it gets to organizational level and things like stewardship, I like this Tylenol scare as a framework or a rubric for saying, how do I do this at the organizational level? Okay, so how can you do things like communicate and listen effectively?